Okay, hello guys. Welcome to this week's session. You'll notice my little timer to I knew I was going to get it wrong, to the side here. So that's when the session's going to start. So just a little bit of feedback. Just about sometimes it can be a touch challenging to get synced with the session. So there's the timer. I'll start the workout exactly in 2 minutes and 33 seconds. Just very quickly, we've got another anaerobic set, another sprint set, a sprint pyramid. So I'm going to be back on the easy hill climb lap again. But feel free to whatever course you use, but just always for these kind of max power sets that are all about getting the biggest numbers you can. Really recommend picking a route, a course, whatever platform you're on that has some sort of steady climb in it, so you get a little bit more resistance on the trainer. I just find it helps really to get that extra bit of power up. Yes, on the Easy Hill Climb lap on Training Peaks Virtual, I've put the message in the WhatsApp. We've got a CP testing session in a couple of weeks on the 20th of January. That'll be at 6:30 p.m. so get that in the diary. It's a night session. Our discussion is going to be about kind of session success and what that means. You know, how do you know that you've done a session well? So we're talking through that, and we've got quite a long warm-up, 15-minute warm-up before we get into a ramp set, just to wake up the legs. Then we've got a second kind of wake up with some little 15-second bursts before we get into sprint sets proper. And it's a very straightforward session tonight, or today, whenever you're doing it. It's a pyramid sprint set, so starting off with 30 seconds, then 45, then 60. We've got two 60-second efforts before we work our way back down to 45 and then back to 30. So you've got 30, 45, two 60s, 45 and then 30, so 6 efforts in total. And yes, I went through that because I couldn't work it out in my head. So yeah, another 35 seconds and then I'll launch into the chat. So get yourself ready, get your fluids on board, and let's get ready to go. So I've got it on terrain mode, just FYI, not erg mode. I'm sick of having these issues. So 5 seconds, get ready to go. In 3, 2, 1. Okay, off we go then. So 3-minute steps in the warm-up. Every 3 minutes will increase the effort a little bit. Okay. So I've not got erg mode on. I'm entirely in terrain mode, so I don't get it and have any technical issues again. So yeah, let's get straight into our chat, shall we? There's actually a fair bit to talk about. The last couple of weeks I've been like, oh god, what am I actually going to talk about? And then I start launching into the notes and I think actually there's quite a lot. So we're talking about session success, like how do you know if if you complete a session well and it's you know, you've done what's asked of you? Well, I think the sort of default, the typical reaction is well, I hit the power targets perfectly, probably with erg mode on. The training stress score, the TSS and Training Peaks matches what was set. Energy system is hit perfectly then. Session goes green. Done. But in reality, this doesn't happen that often, and you know, not every session is perfect. I probably suggest more often than not it's not. You have to make some sort of accommodation. It might be tech issue, it might not just be fitness, it might not be tiredness, it might be tech related. You know, you have an issue with the bike, you run out of time, you have to schedule a session. There's all kinds of scenarios where you feel like you haven't done the session as well as you might have. So I really want to stress kind of what session success looks like. and kind of give you some tools at your full disposal to get there. You know, it isn't just about hitting power targets perfectly, and it's definitely not about having erg mode on all the time, as I've said on numerous occasions. So this does require us to just go through very quickly the energy systems, and I've done kind of numerous sessions about the energy systems, but it is important to understand them, and we've got people joining at different times, people with different kind of knowledge levels. Really important to understand what the energy systems are, because that's the whole game basically. Your goal, and this is, you know, you can take nothing else away, sorry. Your goal with each session is to stimulate a particular energy system to kind of, at least a certain extent, to encourage it to develop. So your aerobic energy system, your zone 2 riding, is basically anything sub-threshold. So anything kind of below your notional FTP, zones 1 to 3. And you know, in reality, they're actually just one training zone. They're all aerobic, all one energy system. You're just stressing it to different extents and in a different way. So this aerobic system that you're hitting, that's where your base mileage comes in, and its purpose is to kind of build your endurance, your underlying fitness. I think we can all kind of grasp that pretty easily. You know, right now, in the depths of winter, that aerobic system isn't our primary focus, and the effect of that as your base fitness drops is you perhaps can't ride for as far as you want, as far as normal, as easily as normal, and you might suffer a bit when it comes to repeatability. When it comes to the hard efforts, you know, you're not recovering as quickly in between them as when you've got a big base of fitness. Your recovery is just much quicker between efforts, and that's because at the moment our focus is on pure power, and I'll get to that in a second. And I know for some of you guys have gone through energy systems a lot, but I think it's really important to stress that every session has a focus. Usually just one energy system, but it could be a couple. But yeah, your session will have a specific focus, and it's important to understand that. So, you know, another concept that you guys will probably know to a certain extent at least is threshold, your aerobic threshold. Now this isn't an energy system, it's a metabolic concept. It's a tipping point between working purely aerobically and then working increasingly anaerobically, i.e. you can't consume enough oxygen to buffer the build-up of lactate and hydrogen ions in your muscles. So that's a concept, it's not an energy system. Okay, it's kind of like the upper limit, or not the upper limit actually, it's kind of like the slippery slide out of the aerobic system. Then your VO2 max likewise is a metabolic concept rather than an energy system as such. It is the maximum volume of oxygen you can use basically. So in essence, once you go beyond your VO2 max, you are shifting into your anaerobic energy systems. And the first one we come to is the lactic acid system. Energy production in the absence of oxygen with lactate as its waste product. And it's good for about a max of 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, so we will use it a little bit in that longer 60-second effort because all your energy systems are used at all times, just to varying degrees. So right now, your anaerobic systems are helping very little, but they are there still. So yeah, we'll use a little bit of the lactic acid system today, particularly as we get into the back end of the repeats, and we're no longer using our phosphocreatine system as much because the pure explosive power is drifted a little bit, because that's the other anaerobic system, your phosphocreatine system, which is good for a max of about 30 seconds. So after that first rep, you know, we will start to drift into lactic acid system. So your aerobic system, your threshold, your VO2 max, your lactic acid system, your phosphocreatine system. Those kind of 5 concepts are basically what all training is marshaled around. So these are the key energy systems and metabolic concepts to know, because one of them will apply to your session, or at least one of them. And as I say, this session you'll be very much hitting your phosphocreatine system, but because they're longer anaerobic efforts beyond 30 seconds, hitting increasingly into that lactic acid system. So those 2 anaerobic systems working in tandem, and so each session is looking to hit one of those systems or metabolic shift, or to try and delay a metabolic shift, and that it should be your sole focus when it comes to session success. You know, am I fulfilling that purpose? Not TSS, not time, and sometimes not even power targets, to be honest. You know, power as a metric is fantastic. It's real time, it's objective, but sometimes there is a disconnect between what your power is saying and what your power you can produce and hitting the desired energy system. You know, for example, when you're fatigued, or, you know, maybe sometimes when you're not fatigued, it's when you're on a recovery, after a recovery day. I always find the day after a recovery day, I'm a little low on power and a little bit sluggish, you know, and so really, when it comes down to it, your heart rate actually is the key metric, but because there is a lag in stimulus and response, it's not a great primary metric. Super important metric, but just particularly for anaerobic and sort of short efforts, and sort of sub 3 minute efforts, your heart rate, you know, it's over before your heart rate becomes useful. But in longer efforts, you know, longer steady state VO2 max and threshold sweet spot efforts, your heart rate is a super useful metric, because you can see the disconnect between your power, how you're feeling, and your heart rate. And that kind of leads me on to, we talked about kind of what the focus is of our sessions. Triggering a response by subjecting your body to a specific stimulus. So, you know, we know the energy systems are the whole game. This means that you need to be very clear when you're going into a session what it's about. Talks about today, phosphocreatine and lactic acid system. You know, the hill sets that we did last week, you know, usually 3 to 8 minute sets for hill reps, and that's developing your VO2 max, that metabolic tipping point, sweet spot and threshold intervals, developing your aerobic capacity and delaying the slip into anaerobic territory. Your long rides are about that underlying foundation that will help you to ride longer, more efficiently, and also help you to recover more quickly between efforts and sessions. So, you know, we've got that underpinning now, actually. But as I said, there can be a disconnect between power and the energy system you're using. Okay, and it's particularly important for these types of sessions. And that is the reason why I am using erg mode less and less, because it simply does not reflect the reality, and it kind of presupposes that each session is created equal and you feel equally good for each session. So it is a useful tool for longer steady state efforts, as I've said before, but increasingly less efficacy. I've had more bad sessions than good, and that's probably reflective of my situation and lack of sleep effort, but it's a feeling I've had for a long time, actually. They're not like an erg mode, that is. Instead, what I want you guys focusing on is the quality of your session and the right level of effort to hit the required energy system. And this does mean being engaged when you're doing your workout and not just kind of getting upset if your power isn't at the right target. Because what we want is you using rate perceived exertion, you know, your effort out of 10. We want you using your heart rate for longer efforts. And we want to use that power as well, all 3 of those interchangeably. So for anaerobic efforts, it's usually pretty simple. Go as hard as you can. Really, you know, we've got your peak power targets, etc. But in reality, it's just go as hard as you can and not think about it too much. But on the repeat efforts, when you repeat on the next intervals after like your big first one, you want to keep an eye on your power still, and if it drops dramatically below the prescribed power in the workout, or massively below your peak effort, your peak interval, the big interval you've done, you might not even be anaerobic anymore. So it's important to recognize that when this happens, when your power drops off and you're going for it, but you're nowhere near the numbers that you did on the first rep or subsequent reps, perhaps it's better to stop, because actually are you in and around your threshold or your VO2 max? And that's not actually the focus of the session. You have to be really honest, because you might be hitting those energy systems elsewhere in your week. So if you're exhausting them kind of unnecessarily, then yeah, it might scupper your week entirely. To say for VO2 max and threshold type sessions, so below anaerobic, you have to be really honest, because they are longer and they usually allow enough time for your heart rate to get up to a reflection of your effort. So you need to be cross-checking all these metrics, and this requires knowing your heart rate zones, or at least knowing your threshold heart rate, because with your threshold heart rate for those longer efforts, you'll be able to cross-check all these three metrics. Okay, so practical example, say we're doing longer VO2 efforts like 5 minutes, 5-minute efforts around 115% of FTP. You should be a little bit above your threshold heart rate for the power that you're putting out. But if you're hitting the power targets, but your heart rate's in, let's say 180s, when your threshold heart rate is 150, and you're absolutely dying, you need to adapt that session to ensure your heart rate is lower and you're in the VO2 max range rather than purely anaerobic. So more like 160s if that threshold heart rate is 150. Okay, so that's how I want you to adapt it and take control of your session and not just be a slave to what's on the plan, because your situation may not reflect that. And this matters in the example I've just given, because as I say, if your session is VO2, but you're full of anaerobic because your heart rate's in the 180s, then that is going to accumulate more fatigue. And if your plan doesn't afford extra recovery for that, that increased level of fatigue will then start to snowball, and it can be a slippery slope to burnout. Okay, so it's really important as we start the ramp set. Okay, so we're just going to build each minute up to sort of a 15-second little nudge. So, in conclusion, the key points you need to take away: know what energy system you're looking at to hit with each session. Know your heart rate zones, or at least your threshold heart rate, so you can quickly gauge where you're meant to be. It may not be possible for an anaerobic set, but for longer VO2 threshold sets, you need to know. Don't be a slave to the power targets, and definitely don't be a slave to erg mode. A high quality session doesn't mean hitting all the power targets perfectly. It means hitting the right energy system as best you can. Use those three metrics: rate perceived exertion, how you're feeling out of 10. Use your heart rate, and also use your power. Okay, you guys are all pretty experienced, so we want you kind of doing what you need to manage your fatigue, and I can't do it for you. You have to do it in the session in real time. So yeah, just remember that session success does not mean perfect power scores. It means hitting the energy system as best you can in the scenario. So right, let's get on to the back to the session. So we're just under threshold, around sweet spot right now. So 7 out of 10 effort. And then we're going to increase for a little 1 minute effort, kind of around your VO2 max. Okay, so remember VO2 It's not an energy system, it's a metabolic concept. Maximum volume of oxygen. Just a little nudge should feel like a 9 out of 10 effort. To have at least, just have a 1 gear left at least. Come on, guys. Keep going. Just another 25 seconds or so. And then we go for another little rise. 15-second effort. Don't think about it too much. Okay, ready to lift. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just a little 15-second nudge. We're still warming up. We're not sprinting. Five, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Back down to sort of zone 2. Just gonna turn my fan on. Good job, guys. Okay, next up, we've got 3 more little 15-second nudges. There's just sort of leg openers. So you want a nice high cadence and it's just an acceleration. We're not looking to go too crazy. Couple of minutes, and we accelerate. So this is 6 efforts tonight, remember? Let's make them good.
This shit hot.
They're not super, one thing I forgot to mention at the start was, not super bothered about anything other than your 30-second power. Although you'll see, I forgot to mention again, we've got big old recovery sets in between, 5 minutes. So you've got a ton of recovery. So yeah, you should be able to get some decent numbers for the 45-second and 1-minute efforts. You should be pretty well recovered. But yeah, just to kind of signpost, that 30-second effort is probably the one where you're likely to get your best numbers. So quick check of peak powers, etc. And if you're doing most of your training on Training Peaks Virtual at the moment, just a quick reminder, you go to menu and at top CP, these are your kind of best numbers that you've done on the turbo for a while, okay? But obviously that requires you to do your training on Training Peaks Virtual. It's not like it's just an FYI. Just about 30 seconds. Tighten up my shoes. Constant shoe fiddle. Is my cycling life. You can accelerate. This isn't our first effort, so still, if you can believe it, 30 minutes in, part of our warm-up. All about just waking up the legs. Here we go, come on then. 15 seconds. Just opening up the legs, not full on sprinting yet. Three, 2, and 1. 2 more of these. 45 seconds in between. seconds. Accelerate again. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Just accelerating. Two more seconds. And let's get turn my avatar around. Yeah, come on. Let's go. Spin down the hill a bit. I'm going to do this next acceleration going downhill so I can get plenty of road to then do the sprints on in a minute. It's getting 3, 2, 1. Okay, last little acceleration. Don't stress, just get the legs going a bit. Nice high cadence. Upwards to 100 RPM if you can get there. In 3, 2, and relax. Okay. Now we just kind of get our breath back a little bit. Swig of fluids. Just generally chill out. Right, just about 3.5 minutes, and then we're going to hit the first proper sprint rep, okay? So we've got a couple more weeks, well, I think basically 1 more week of this type of stuff. And then we move into working on kind of repeatability, so there'll be less recovery in between efforts, but less of a focus on peak powers. We'll focus on kind of how you can repeat them and how close you can stay within the average power of each interval, and also some big accelerations or kind of like a high baseline. So all that means is things like you'll have like a long sweet spot effort, but it will be interspersed with sprints or VO2 max efforts. And it's all just starting to have one eye on the race season or the event that you guys got going on. So hopefully we built some nice strength in the last couple of months. And then we're going to look to build some repeatability and just get a bit sharp for, particularly for the roads racer guys and the crit guys when kind of March, April time comes. Okay. So that's what we've got to look forward to. I think it's always nice to move into a new phase, to have a little slightly different focus, just so you kind of feel like you're, at least you're kind of moving on to the next stepping stone. So I think otherwise the winter can be a bit challenging. So a minute and 45, and then we're going to go to the first effort, okay? In a sense, this session, because it's kind of the pyramid, it's kind of, I've chosen it so that it's a little bit of a transition towards what I've just been talking about, that repeatability, albeit, as you see, 5-minute recovery intervals in between, which is tons of recovery. But just the change in duration of effort and the sort of up and down nature of the session. It's just kind of like, yeah, as I say, like a bit of a transition to that stuff we're going to be having in 2-3 weeks. Right, 1 minute, and we go for the first effort. Remember, it's 30 seconds, so you wanna launch hard, but yeah, you want to save something for that final 10 seconds, basically. Sorry, I just need to clear my nose a little bit, apologies. Okay, 30 seconds. I'll turn my guy around in a few seconds. Okay, so 20 second sets. Start getting into the big ring, start getting your rough gear Selection relatively right, so you may have to drop down 1 or 2 gears. 10 seconds and then we go. 3, 2, 1, here we go. "20 seconds. Okay, last 10, let's kick again, come on. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Relax. You've got bloody ages. 5 minutes. This will all be super high quality reps today. It's getting a bit cold. Well, guys. Sorry. So that's 1 down. You get a bit longer. Work our way through. 5 to go. So just relax. I want to remember what I talked about. So a session like this, success doesn't necessarily mean a peak power each time you do this a session. It's hard to get this one too wrong, other than if you're just not on a good day, you're sort of flogging a dead horse. It's a difference between, oh, this is tough, you know, I have to motivate myself and just kind of, just doing yourself a disservice. So hopefully everything's going really well for you. That was good first effort, but just remember to look after yourself, really. We're only in January, you know, most people's events don't start until at least April, so it's a long way to go. Not every session has to be perfect, but a successful one means you do enough to revoke the energy system. It's a lot like key sessions. You know, when I talk about key sessions, I say, you know, do the key sessions and it'll keep you moving forwards. You can't do anything else that week, you know. It's a similar concept, you know, doing enough of the session well enough to keep you moving forwards, to revoke that stimulus. Okay, that stimulus doesn't always need to be maximal. Turn my little dude around now. Start to think about rep run 2. I think also what's interesting about a session like this is it's quite hard to pace, because you do the 30-second effort and then you're like, oh, I can't imagine doing that for another 15 seconds, and you just start to have to think about it a little bit. Think about how you go off. It's always, I would suggest, better to finish hard than to go out hard, too hard, sorry, and struggle to finish it off. Do you want to think about those first 5 pedal strokes? Because as we start to think about racing, you know, let's start to apply this to scenarios. You know, we want maybe that first 5 pedal strokes out the corner, always vital. Quite often low cadence, high torque, and that is how we're starting these intervals, particularly if you're doing it on a little hill like this. When you drop into that heavy gear, these first 5 pedal strokes, very, very similar to if you're doing these types of efforts in the middle of a crit or a race and exploding out a corner. They don't necessarily feel like rapid because you haven't got the high leg turnover, but it's that torque, that high power lift off we are working on here, and then the high cadence should come as you get on top of the gear. So there's an element of kind of learning how to select the right gear and things like that in this as well. And honestly, it does help when it comes to racing, just have like a instinctual feel for a gear and to what you can push off. So that fire and fast rep was good, but if I'd gone into another gear, drop down before starting, I would have struggled, I think, to push off well. Because yes, you want high torque, low cadence to kick off, but if you go too low cadence, you know, you can scupper yourself. Right, let's get ready to go. Let's get that gear. 3, 2, 1, here we go. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, 10 seconds, let's try and kick. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Excuse me, I'm very snotty today. Nice and easy. That's 2 down. Ready to go. Now the next 2, remember, are 1 minute long. Oh, now you guys, but with the cold air, I'm in the garage, absolutely freezing. And you know, when I'm outside, like riding back from work or what have you, cold air really takes my breath away. Oh, felt it on that one. So again, that's another example of something that can impact session success. Doesn't seem to be impacting my power, so I was quite happy with those first 2 efforts, but it might be something that starts to kind of interfere, at least with my mental state, is, you know, these recovering tools on sort of, God, I'm like snatching at breaths, I can feel it a little bit, and that just might hinder my ability to recover between sets. So by the time I get to sit, I might be struggling more than otherwise. Anyway, just these little things, like, they all matter, and I'm just trying to think of ways that I can illustrate what success means. It basically means handling the reality of the situation in such a way that you still get what you need out of it. And I just love for your mindsets to shift a little bit. Yes, the power targets are important, they're reflective of what you can do, but they are a static target, and as your fatigue levels, and as the other thing I think I haven't mentioned is how your aerobic threshold, it shifts. It's not, we try and pin a number on it, we try and pin a heart rate on it, but it shifts, it changes on a daily basis. You know, not much, but it does shift. And so some days you'll start accruing lactate at significant levels at a lower heart rate. You know, if you're carrying illness or something, or your body's maybe not full ill, but you're fighting off a bug. You know, that's an example of when you can hit that threshold earlier. I know I've really muddied the water, and as athletes you're paying for a coach and you just want things to be made simple for you. But there is, and I think I do that, I hope, but I think we're, all of you guys, you know, there's no one I know watching the session who isn't at a level now where kind of taking control of their sessions in this way, it isn't important for them. You know, I don't want to train zombies I want to train smart athletes, because the greater your knowledge, kind of the more more specific we can get. You know, the deeper we can dive into data, the deeper we can dive into kind of types of sessions and concepts. And a smart athlete is always a better athlete. So I apologise if I've muddied the water a little bit, but I don't think I said anything that was too complex. It's more perhaps my delivery. Because as I said, I was, as I was talking, I was like snatching from my breath a little bit. Even though I'd done a warm up before I started, I still felt myself snatching the breath a little bit. I'm just like, I don't know how well I'm delivering this. So if you got a bit lost at any point, it's probably more a case of me than you. And if anyone needs anything clarifying, just remember, these sessions aren't the only time we have to discuss this stuff. I try and kind of give like foundational knowledge in these sessions as something we can then talk about in catch-ups or have specific chats about. So just don't feel like this is the only time we have to discuss what session success means. And particularly if we're talking about it in catch-ups, we can talk about specific sessions and experiences. So just remember that, guys, and leave feedback in your sessions as well afterwards. Right, here we go. 1 minute going in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Building up to power, getting that cadence up. Point 5. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay, let's kick again in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Come on, lift it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Woo-wee. Oh man. Yeah, really felt that one. We're halfway through. Well done, guys. One thing I should say is, don't stress too much about the power target, but because they are quite long, you know, once you've got your breath back, you recovered a little bit, you stop seeing stars, the power target is a little higher. We're at about 65% of FTP. So, because it's such a long recovery set, we don't want you slipping into kappa legs. So, we definitely want you, once you feel ready, lift the power a touch, just so you start to tick along nicely and keep some warmth in your legs. Get ready for the next effort. Okay? You don't have to hit it perfectly, but you should be totally chilled. So 1 more minute long, 1 more long one, then we start to work our way down the slope, so to speak, interval wise at least. Stuff, guys. Does anyone else get this when they set their bike up? My bike is at just the slightest little angle to the screen, and my little silly mind cannot handle it. I'm like, maybe. Oh, actually, it's actually fairly off. Yeah, a few degrees off. It's really bothering me. Anyway, right, focus. I say to myself more than you. So, 1:20. Keeping those legs going over. Try and stay above about 80 RPM. Heart rate should be coming down. If it starts to drop below 100 beats per minute, you're probably going a bit too easy. Okay. And actually, that's quite a good general rule, by the way, when it comes to recovery. If your heart rate is dropping below 100 beats, then yeah, you're probably taking it too easy. Okay? If it's getting close to 100 between sets, that's great. You know, that's fast recovery, but if it's starting to drop into the 90s, then yeah, the recovery period is either too long or you're taking it too easy. Okay? Quite often though, at the end of a session, I'll stick along, I'll stay on the bike, or I'll keep running until my heart rate does get below 100 beats. I just thought it's just a good way of me knowing how long of a cool down I need. So just put a tip there. Right, forgot to turn my doodah around, so let's turn around 10 seconds, then we hit the final 1 minute effort, okay? Let's get ready. 3, 2, 1, here we go. Point 5. Try and draw the shoulders down. Keep your chin up. Thirty seconds. 20. Okay, 10 seconds. Lift it again, let's go. Okay, relax. Oh. Well done, guys. Get shorter from here on. Catch your breath. Bring the cadence back up above 80. Then start to just steadily introduce the power again. Getting ready to be close to the recovery target. Just 2 more to go. Just give me 15 seconds. And then I'll just have a point to our chat. Okay, so what I was going to say is actually that last interval for me is really applicable to what we're talking about. So in my head what I was saying was, right, I need to keep my power above 400 watts. And at one point I started to slip down to about 360. And I'm not fit, you know. Yeah, I'm not going to be too hard on myself here, but you know, basically what that kind of starts to tell me is, you know, my notional FTP anyway, generally, when I'm fit, is around 330. Okay, so obviously give or take 10, 15 watts depending on how fit I am, but kind of when I'm properly fit, particularly triathlon fit, threshold power is around 330. So as I'm getting to the 360s, I'm like, now at sort of VO2 level, I'm not hitting the right energy system. So I told myself, right, I need to get it above 400 again and keep it there. And also what I was saying in my mind was, if I can't hold above 400 watts, so for instance in that last 10 seconds when I want to lift, if I lift and then immediately plummeted below 400 watts and you know it's clear that I just cannot hold that, then that is a good sign that my next reps might not be good quality. Okay, and so obviously I'm going to do the whole session because it's a bit pointless me being here otherwise. But if I was doing this on my own, I would now keep an eye on my power for the next 2 efforts. And you know, my 2 efforts I'd probably, yeah, I'll get it done. But if it was more than that, you know, I'd start to think, right, is there a really strong business case for doing all of these reps if I'm dropping out of anaerobic zone and more to more VO2 max? And in that instance I'll be like, probably not. You know, what point of the season am I? What's the purpose of the session? The session's all about maximal power and really kind of stressing the muscles and your lactic acid and your phosphocreatine systems so that you get better at doing these efforts, you get more power. And so if my power's really dropped off, I need to start thinking, you know, am I getting the most out of this time? And if I'm doing VO2 reps rather than anaerobic reps, is that purpose of the session? And to be fair, if this session was more about repeatability, there would be a not strong argument for saying you need to keep your ass going, and maybe the next session will be easier, but or more consistent. But because we're looking for really high quality reps, top end power, beyond 6 reps, I might be thinking, if it's 8 or 10, is it worth me doing that? Am I still fulfilling the purpose of the session? Am I still stressing my anaerobic energy systems to the extent I should be? I just thought that might be interesting, the sort of mentality. You know, obviously in this instance I'm working off power because my heart rate would be, you know, at the end there it's about 150. So I hadn't even gotten close, hadn't even gotten to my threshold heart rate, which is usually around 156. So, you know, the heart rate in this session is not so helpful, other than in that recovery target I gave you earlier. But, you know, I am going off power and just, you know, using kind of general kind of numbers, rough figures that should vaguely ascertain whether I'm in the right energy system. Anyway, right, 3, 2, 1, 45 seconds. Here we go. Penultimate rep. High quality. $30. 20. Kick again at 10. Here we go, come on, kick. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh. Okay. Well done, guys. Just give you a few more seconds before I start chat again. Okay, so just carrying on from that scenario, you know, had my eye on 400 watts in the previous effort, recovered, and that set was pretty good. I was quite happy with that. And so it might have been that the back-to-back 1 minute efforts, if I had another 1 minute effort, I would have struggled. But that 45 seconds, I think it was more of a mental thing. Knowing it was shorter, I knew I could kind of hold it. So yeah, all good for the final rep basically. And these are just kind of like the conversations that I'm always having in my head about how am I gonna get the most quality out of this session. And fortunately, whilst I'm not anywhere near kind of personal best or peak numbers, you know, I know the wattage I'm doing is enough for a stimulus, for a decent stimulus as well. So yeah, just all about this kind of thinking around the numbers that I want you guys to start doing. And that's part and parcel of why I'm getting you to track peak power numbers and stuff, and knowing what they are before you do a sprint set. And the same is true for threshold or whatever. When it comes to sweet spot and threshold sets and VO2 sets, you start to work more within a range. So, and again, this is why erg mode irks me. So, you know, if you've got threshold effort, you know, you've got some time trial type efforts, you know, you kind of want to be able to fluctuate, because with a long threshold effort, there is a big mental element to it. Okay, so, and erg mode, I think, can undercut that. So, you know, you want to be hovering between sort of 95 and 105% of FTP, you know, and all that big range is going to be squarely hitting that aerobic threshold limit and just kind of teasing that aerobic threshold upwards. Okay, and so sometimes, you know, when I do like long threshold efforts, for whatever reason I cannot hold exactly threshold, but if I take 5% off, I'm happy and I can really hold it well and I can stay positive. So it's just yet another kind of example of how we set these targets, we set these objectives, but you have to be the one to interpret them and just kind of like give yourself wiggle room and not just bin a session because, you know, it hasn't gone perfectly to plan. I think I've kind of laboured the point. I will do a summary at the end, but I think I'll leave you alone for the last minute, the last effort. Well done, guys. Okay, ready to go again for final effort. So 10 seconds. 3, let's make it good. 2, 1, lift off, let's go. Really big, come on. Prepare this effort to the first one after the session. See how you do. 20 seconds. Ten seconds, let's kick. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax. Okay. Well done, guys. Spin out the legs. What I was saying earlier about when you're on the cool down, just bringing your heart rate steadily back down to 100 beats per minute and below. And then, you know, you've kind of done a good cool down. But I'll just do a quick recap. So just remember the energy systems. Your aerobic system, sub-threshold, your endurance system, then you've got that aerobic threshold, which is the kind of tipping point within your aerobic system where you start to work more and more anaerobically. Then you've got your VO2 max, which is that kind of final drop off. Maximum volume of oxygen you can use, and then you start to really shift into the anaerobic systems. And you've got two of them. Lactic acid, which is good for 2-3 minutes max. And then you've got your phosphocreatine system, which is more like 30 seconds. So that first effort and that final effort, we would have used that heavily. Maybe less so on the final effort. But hopefully your numbers were still good. So yeah, just knowing that underpinning, that energy system, that metabolic concepts, that is just really important, because then you can kind of look at your session and go, oh, okay, Rich has got me doing 30-second sprints, just on that cusp between phosphocreatine system and lactic acid system, but I'm meant to be working anaerobically, full gas effort. Okay, that's all about quality, high power training. VO2 max, right, I need to be a little bit above threshold, so keep an eye on my heart rate. It's going to be longer effort, unless it's like 30 on, 40 off or whatever. We do lots of those sessions, which are just a good way of accruing VO2. But if it's like a longer steady state VO2 set, 3 minutes and up, 3 to 8 minutes, keep an eye on your heart rate. That should be a bit above your threshold heart rate, so you've got to know what that is. Alright, if your threshold heart rate is 150 and you're on the 180s doing a VO2 max set, you're probably working too hard, or something's not right, Okay. So knowing that what energy system you're meant to be hitting, that will dictate success, not whether you hit the power numbers perfectly. And just remember that you want to use perceived effort, how it relates to your heart rate, how it relates to your power, those three metrics interchangeably. And depending on the session, one might be more important than the other. Okay? Don't be a slave to the target, particularly for anaerobic stuff, and maybe even sometimes VO2 stuff. The power targets we set, they're to a certain extent they're anaerobic, they're arbitrary. I was talking to one of the guys today about how frustrating it is that we don't yet have a platform that can give us properly personalised power targets for hitting exactly somebody's anaerobic, somebody's kind of energy system. So, for example, I'm very much set up for like cyclocross and crit race and explosive stuff at the moment, and I have been for like a couple of years. So less so triathlon and time trialing. And so my how I hit my energy systems is different, because my aerobic threshold might be kind of relatively low to normal. So like if I was preparing for triathlon, but my anaerobic numbers are so much better than they ever would be. And in order to trigger that proper anaerobic response, I have to work a lot harder, not harder, but much higher power than, when I've been training for Ironman, for example. And so, anyway, so basically my point is, don't be a slave to power targets, don't be a slave to erg mode, and just remember, a high quality session, it's all about kind of stressing an energy system rather than perfectly hitting a power number, or hitting a power number and not necessarily able to hold it perfectly steady. It's okay to have a fair bit of wavering. Sometimes you're going to be up and down, but you still somehow get to the same average power. Anyway, that's enough out of me. Hopefully you found that relatively helpful, if not interesting. But yeah, well done guys, and I'll see you next week. Take care.